Okay, well, I guess can we sort of open up with introductions? And with introductions, can you just sort of give a brief sort of summary of like what you think civic engagement means? And our model, my name is Marlon Chamberlain. I am now the campaign manager for the Fully Free campaign with Heartland Alliance, which is a campaign to end the 1,189 collateral consequences that people face after incarceration. And when I think about civic engagement, I would say that I could summarize it by saying that I think, to me, civic engagement is what you do after the election is over. That's how I would define civic engagement. And I will popcorn to Brian Harrington.
How y'all doing? My name is Brian Harrington. I'm Civic Leader Manager here at Chicago Votes. My belief on what civic engagement is everything outside of the mainstream campaigning. So reaching the ground, reaching the day-to-day people, you know, through canvassing, through phone banking, through all of those type of things, reaching the youth, the people that these policies affect, and getting them engaged. So to do this work with the organizers, I'll pass it to Lee.
You pass it to me? Dope. Hi, y'all. I'm Rudy. She, her pronouns. I work at Chicago Votes. And for me, civic engagement means how you relate directly to your community. So I keep mine super broad. That could be if you engage your neighbors in asking for a cup of sugar, to addressing issues that folks see, like one of their neighbors not having something they need, all the way up to passing like a bill or ordinance to help make their community better, making a community garden, anything of that nature is how you engage with people who you're in direct community with. And I will pass it to Jess.
Thanks, Rudy. Hi, y'all. It's great to be here. I'm Jess. I use she, her pronouns. I work in fair housing at the Chicago Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights. I'm really excited to learn from all of you. When I think about civic engagement, I think about communities most affected by an issue being at the table to determine how that issue is going to be dealt with. And I think about accountability from community members and organizations to holding elected officials to what they say they're going to do when they're trying to get our votes. I'll pass it to Brian.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brian, the cultural manager at Chicago Votes. And when I think of civic engagement, I think of the education aspect first, educating people on the issues that directly impact them, and then mobilizing community beyond that point. I can pass this to Josh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Josh, Chicago Votes. And when I think about civic engagement, I like to attach it to education a lot, mainly because I feel like people don't realize how much civics is incorporated into almost everything that happens to them daily, from like the building they live on, the sidewalks they walk on, the roads they drive on, the policies that impact their paychecks, the justice system. It is so relevant throughout everything you do all throughout your day. There's a commitment to education that is part of engagement that I believe is part of that, that phrase. I will pass it to Kia.
Yeah, I feel like when I think civic engagement, I think of it kind of synonymously with like community empowerment. So I think as long as we are validating community members' voices, and it's always kind of bottom up change and not top down, that's civic engagement, and just sort of a world where people recognize that their voices matter and the needs that they identify in their own communities matter. I'll pass it to Katrina.
Hello, I'm Katrina Fitt. I'm the Communications and Digital Strategy Manager at Chicago Votes. And to me, civic engagement is super broad. So it's finding ways to influence the different spheres of life in society that impact us. So it can be like super small, like Rudy said, as much as like getting to know your neighbors, or something super like large and macro, like passing laws. I will pass it to Javier.
Javi, you still with us?
Yes, sir. I'm with you, sir. How are you, Mr. Chamberlain?
I'm good. We just popcorn to you.
Okay, you gonna have to give me the question.
So introduce yourself and then explain to us, like, how would you define civic engagement?
Well, my name is Javier Reyes, and I'm a new member to Chicago Vote. And civic, it has to do with engaging people in the community, in different ventures, and just kind of like listening more than talking sometimes, and just being of service.
Okay, who's left? You got a popcorn to somebody. Let me see who's next.
Um,
I can go.
but I don't know. I'm participants. Who hasn't done it?
I got you, Javier.
It's been.
I can go, Javier. It's good. Hi, everybody. Alex, she, her, hers. Community organizer with Chicago Votes. Civic engagement is literally everything. Like, we are making a whole shirt with like 50 different ways to be a civically engaged. It's like, you know, anything from reading something about what's going on in your community, having a conversation with somebody, signing a petition, to like doing a whole direct action and doing all of that. Voting is definitely just the one way to do that. And I'll pass it to Stevie.
Hello, my name is Stevie. I am the executive director at Chicago Votes. And civic engagement, I think, similar to what I've heard a lot of people say, I think it's very vague. Not vague. I think that it falls on a very wide spectrum. There's a bunch of different ways to be civically engaged, but like, I guess the broad definition for me would be just participating in the process of learning and trying to make your community better, learning about your community and trying to make your community better. So yeah, I got on kind of late. Aaron, have you gone? Nice, a popcorn to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Erin Hernandez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an analyst for the Cook County Board of Review. And for me, civic engagement, it's like a big umbrella. It encompasses a lot of areas where like you could get engaged through voting, through community organizing, and a lot of the ideas wouldn't come to fruition without everything all together. And I'll popcorn to Aziz.
Civic engagement to me means like going out to my community and in any way possible that I can help out, like going out to my community, and if I see an elder like walking with groceries, like help them, give it to their house, like, or like, you know, like if like whatever I can do outside my house or like within my like reach, I'll do it. So that's what civic engagement means to me.
Was that everybody? Okay.
Brian, have you gone?
Brian Harvey. Okay, maybe Brian stepped away. Was it anybody else that didn't go? Is Brian the last one? Okay. Well, I would definitely say after hearing everyone's definition, I think we could just end the training. I think we all sort of know what civic engagement is and what it looks like. So what I want to do is, and I want to use a PowerPoint presentation, but it's only 3 or 4 slides. Can I share my screen? Okay. Did somebody say something?
No, I think we just said, yeah, you can.
Okay.
You should be able to. Let me know if you can't.
Okay, let's see. You know what? I'm gonna just keep it right here. So normally in any civic engagement training that I've been in, I did want to cover the basics before we start a dialogue around what civic engagement. Somehow I keep getting people who are entering into the waiting room.
You're I think you might be a co-host.
Okay.
That's why you're seeing that, but don't worry about it.
Okay. So normally in any civic engagement training that I've been in, they always start off talking about civic engagement. And I think one of the first questions that people ask or believe, or there's a misunderstanding around is, and I'm going to ask this question to the group. If you have a felony conviction, can you vote?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you can. And I think part of it, and I don't know, we've heard that there are close to 4.2 million people with felony convictions. And a lot of times I've heard stories of parole officers or probation officers telling their clients that they can't vote if they're on parole and probation. I've heard stories around people who were threatened that if they voted, that they would violate them. But as soon as you are released from prison, you are eligible to vote. As it says on the slide, you are only prohibited from voting while you are incarcerated, which there is legislation now, which we're hoping to change that. But right now, currently, if you're incarcerated, you cannot vote. But as soon as you release, you are able to vote. What do you need to know as an eligible voter? You can use your IDOC card to register. You need some form of ID to register to vote. It says you can e-register to vote when you are released from jail, even if you registered to vote before your conviction. And then if you have restrictions on your movement, you can still vote at an early polling location or vote by mail. Other civic rights. Now, this is something that I just learned recently around jury duty. This is another civic right that we have as registered voters. And as you can see, it says jury service cannot serve on a jury during incarceration, but can absolutely prohibit form jury duty in the future after conviction. Wait a minute, so I'm confused. Can we register or serve as a juror with a felony conviction?
It's funny that you asked that, Marlon, because that is one of Chicago Vote's bills right now. I mean, while you're incarcerated, you definitely cannot. But the way, supposedly right now, you should be able to. But the language of our law is very vague. And so we're trying to pass a law to make it very clear that if you have a criminal conviction, you can still.
Gotcha.
It's also one of the first questions that prosecutors will ask. When you go through, they get a list of all the people who potentially could serve on a jury. And when they choose those people, one of the first survey questions is, have you ever been arrested? So it's a real quick way to knock anybody off jury duty if you have a previous criminal record. So our bill bans that from happening.
Facts. That should be a legal question.
Got you. Absolutely. So I wanted to start off with the basis. Are there any questions about just civic duties and involving voting or jury duty? Are there any questions? Okay. So what I wanted to do is sort of just introduce myself and how I sort of like my journey and what I would say in civic engagement. I was initially sentenced to a 20-year federal prison sentence in 2002. And in 2010, there were a lot of advocacy groups that were lobbying a federal piece of legislation that reduced the ratio between crack and cocaine. And so in that, the Fair Sentencing Act was passed, and my sentence was reduced in 2010 to 14 years, in which I ended up serving 10.5 years in federal prison. And so upon my release, I wanted to get involved in 2012. And I really didn't know, like, I didn't know what civic engage, like what did that mean? Like, I didn't know. And so I met someone who, Eddie Boganegro, who is now leading a lot of violence prevention work, who sort of invited me to attend a meeting with an elected official. And I didn't know who he was at the time. I just agreed and said that I would come. And when I went to this meeting, now I know it was the Senate president at the time, which was John Cullerton. But in this meeting, we were working a bill that would expand ceiling eligibility. And so in this meeting, the senator asked a question about my experience and how long I had been home. And in that moment, I realized that this was a way that I could give back for, or even continue the work that a lot of organizations started, even when I was incarcerated, with changing laws. Like at that moment, I sort of realized like why it was important to vote, like, and knowing who your elected officials are. And so after that meeting, I stayed involved. And after a year of being a leader with this particular organization, I was hired as the lead organizer of an initiative called FORCE, which was an acronym that stood for Fighting to Overcome Records and Create Equality. And this group was a group of formerly incarcerated people who were doing advocacy work towards policy change. But within that role, within my role as the community organizer, we also launched a voter registration drive where we registered 2,000 people that were directly impacted to vote. And I'll talk about some of the strategies that we use to register people. But what I learned and what I heard over and over and over as I was out talking to people was the first thing people would say is, I can't vote because I have a felony conviction. And so I was in a position to where I was able to explain to them that they could vote. Since I've been home and with CRS, we helped formed a coalition called the Rocky Coalition that was a group of different non-for-profit organizations that went on to pass a total of 6 pieces of legislation that either removed barriers or expanded opportunities for directly impacted people. And so not only when we were out doing the voter registration work, that was a real opportunity for us to talk about why it was important for us as directly impacted people to be a part of this process, because then this was a way that we could amplify our voices when we talk about or have conversations around barriers or opportunities that impact us. And so from that, we were able to really recruit people from just having them register to vote, and then we recruited them in the work to where they helped us. Well, we were in Springfield every year. We would be in Springfield the entire session. Leaders would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and we would train on the train on our way to Springfield to talk to legislators, and really just started teaching people the legislative process. Because like I said, if you look at the news and you look at the media, a lot of times we only hear the hoopla when there's a big election coming up. But after the election, we don't see all of these different politicians in our communities. We don't see the commitments that they made to us a lot of times during their election cycles. And so this was a way for us to mobilize directly impacted people to say, what would it look like if we began to organize across the state, organizing directly impacted people? How would that amplify our voices? And what we've seen when in passing of the 6 bills that we passed is that it worked. It worked when we went out and engaged people and explained to them the legislative process and how they can get involved and how and why their voice matters. And so I do want to open it up if anybody else has had a similar experience of coming home from prison and sort of walking into this sort of organizing work. Please, I welcome you to share.
Well, my story ain't is extensive, being that I barely been on a year, but it's the same narrative that that you don't have the right to vote is cemented. Like you automatically, like it's just a thing. Like you think that is real, right? So being informed, ironically enough, by Marlon, it was helpful, and it sparked a fire and wanted me to make others aware. You know what I'm saying? That when you get home, you come home, you can make immediate impact with your vote, with your voice. And so yeah, so I got involved with Live Free, but we doing a campaign here in Rockford, and we just that's our main goal is to bring exposure to you know, getting them numbers up, because a lot of times I saw a slide once about how close these campaigns actually be, and the numbers and the amount of people that come home from prison is staggering. They could change elections every year, local elections, major elections, and they don't know that they can actually make that change. So for me, doing this work now, I'm in the midst of it for the same reasons Marlon was. So thanks.
Yeah, and I would absolutely say, like, before I went to prison, if I had no clue about like who my alderman was, or why it was important to register to vote, or like who my senator was, like I had no clue about who any of these people were. And so throughout my process, even now, I feel like I'm still learning about the legislative process and how all of this stuff sort of like impacts and influences like what happens in my community. And some of the themes that I heard over and over and over was community engagement, community voice, community influence. And I would just ask this question to the group. Can anybody tell me who their alderman is?
Mine is Alderman Bug.
We got one.
Mine is Pat Dowell.
Very familiar with Pat Dowell.
Mine is Leslie Hairston.
Me too, Leslie Hairston over here.
Linda McNeely.
Got you. Can anybody explain, like, what are some of the duties of the alderman or alderwoman, woman? I don't want to get beat up by my wife.
They get to decide who gets to build developments in the ward, and they give up building permits.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
They sit on committees and make decisions about which kinds of ordinances and bills move forward and which ones don't.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Walter Burnett.
They decide on our budget every year.
Absolutely. So a lot of like the organizing work that's happening to defund or reallocate funds from the police department our aldermen or alderwomen have a lot to say in that. So the next question that I would ask the group is, can anybody name their state representative and senator?
Yeah, my state rep is Carol Ammons, and my senator, I believe, is Dick Durbin.
Your state senator.
Oh, Scott Bennett, I believe.
This is a sharp group. Anybody else?
I told you, Marlon.
Yeah, this is a sharp group. I'm glad I didn't put the $20 on the line. I had told Alex I was going to challenge the group to see if they knew who the elected officials were. I would have had to give up $20. And anybody else? And the reason why I say this is important, and just knowing the roles of our elected officials, is making sure that when we come up with these like campaigns, or if there's something happening in our communities, when I think about civic engagement, I also think about just being able to direct the community to the right person who can create the change that we're looking for. Because you can exhaust a lot of time and energy in a campaign and then and be in a meeting talking to your state senator, when it's the alderman or alderwoman who has the power to create and make that change in your community. So when I think about civic engagement, I think about like how we can learn this information, but then also be able to communicate this information to the community to help guide them in the right direction. We sort of use this framing of saying that we believe in educating, activating, and politicizing folks. Because I heard a lot of people talk about the educational piece when we think about civic engagement. But I also think about the activation piece, which means leadership development. Because the more we can go back to the community and bring this information, I heard somebody talk about the work that happens after the election and being on the ground and talking to the day-to-day folks. Those are the people that we really have to engage civically to get them involved in the process to create the changes that we're looking for. And a lot of times, just speaking from my own experience, when you don't have this information or you don't know, you could get frustrated and just say, I don't want to be bothered at all because it's too confusing. I just think about my first time in Springfield and walking in the rotunda and how overwhelming that felt to me. But just knowing that I was with a group of people that were supporting me and that were prepping me, where I was able to like speak to legislators, and I felt confident from the support that I was receiving from my team. And so I think it's important for us to learn like who the people in power are so that we can help guide people to the right person. So I'm going to ask this question, and there's no money on the line, but I do want to ask this question. Can somebody tell me how many aldermen there are in the city of Chicago?
Is there 50?
Absolutely. Who said 50? I'm sorry. Okay, thanks, Aaron. Can somebody tell me how many legislators are in the General Assembly?
I tried to cheat. My laptop ain't even working.
Whatever 73 plus 45 is.
That is it. So let me ask this a follow-up question. How many votes does it take to pass a bill out of the House?
Isn't it just like a majority?
You are absolutely right. I don't think it's an exact number, but we used to have a number where we felt safe. Somebody said a lot. Absolutely. So we would say 60 votes to pass anything out of the House, and we would say 30 to pass something out of the Senate. And like I said, all of this information is important and really learning like the legislative process and how a bill is created, how it goes from one committee to the House floor, all of the rules and things that's involved in this process. Like I said, we are blessed to be in an opportunity to where there's a proverb that says that he who associates with wise men will become wise himself. And I think about this group of people that we have access to, and we also have social capital to learn these things, but it's also our obligation to go back and really train the community about these different layers of government and how our votes and voices matter. As somebody said, I think somebody sort of framed it well when saying just participating in a process where we're able to learn to try to really rebuild our communities. And to me, I think that's a perfect example of what we want to do when I think about civic engagement. Like we want to learn, we want to be able to go back and really explain the different layers in the lamest terms to really engage people and get them involved in the process. I have Willette was supposed to join us, but I did not send her the calendar invite. Alex, can you send Willette? She just called me, so I'm pretty sure that's why she's calling.
Yeah. And I think I might have her email address. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Willette.
And please feel free to ask questions. If anybody has any thoughts, please feel free to share. Like I wanted this to be sort of an open dialogue. I didn't want to have like this lecture style training. I really just wanted to open up to just talk back and forth. So please feel free to jump in whenever you feel like talking. 90 minutes can be a long time of just sitting and listening to a lecture, especially if you've been on Zoom calls all day.
Okay. I am sharing it with her now.
Okay.
So hopefully she'll join us soon.
So are there any questions, any thoughts, concerns, ideas? Because what I do want to talk about is like in a minute, I want to segue to having a discussion around what are some of the challenges that we've seen in regards to like trying to engage people in the legislative process or just in civic engagement in general. Any questions, thoughts, concerns, nothing to share?
Can you ask that again?
So I was just asking, does anybody have any questions about me, my experience, my story, just the legislative process? And then in a minute, I wanted to segue to talking about just like challenges that we faced trying to engage people civically. But then also I wanted to leave room for us to talk about solutions that we can talk about non-traditional ways of engaging people. And I will also share about my experience in Georgia in this last Senate election.
Right, I'd love to hear about that because definitely a struggle to say the least, getting people to stick with the movement, you know what I'm saying? Being that it was nothing like that here in this city. And so I definitely love to hear what was some tactics, some strategies to get people to follow through.
Yeah, Marlon, I need to hear that story too, man.
Well, was Tierra Turner on the call? Did she? We have a couple new people if they want to jump in and introduce themselves.
I think Tierra and Willette just joined us now.
Yeah.
Tierra, if you just want to introduce yourself, just I think, and what does civic engagement mean to you?
She says she's not allowed.
Okay, try now maybe. I know that Bryant was also dealing with this earlier. Oh, Zoom.
I wonder if Willette is having the same challenge. Willette, can you hear us, Willette?
I can.
Okay. You want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hang on a minute. Hello, everyone. I am Willette Benford, and I am the decarceration organizer for Live Free Illinois. Do I need to kick it to somebody or everybody else?
No,
All right, can you all hear me now? This is Tiara Turner.
we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. I'm Tiara Turner. I'm currently an engineering student at Iowa State University. This is kind of like my first introduction into civil engagement. And to me, what it means is being active and ensuring that you make things happen for the causes that you are interested in and passionate about. So trying to navigate that space. I'm around a lot of people who are currently active in civic engagement, but as I try to state in like the chat, I myself have not found like the appropriate level, be it the community space or the level of involvement, especially being in school currently, but I'm about to graduate. So I'm trying to, since I'll have more time, I'm trying to figure out the avenues that, my skills would be best suited for.
Thank you. So and I can just sort of bring you up to speed real quick. So we've just sort of talked about the myth that formerly incarcerated people cannot vote. So we talked about that being a myth and it's not true. We've also talked about the different layers of government and why it's important for us as community members and leaders to be involved in the election and legislative process so that our voices and the voices of the community can be heard. So we talked about the importance of knowing who your alderman or alderwoman, state reps, senators, US reps. It's important to know who the people in power are and who the representatives are of our communities who say they represent us. And it's important also for us to be in relationship with them to make sure that our voices are heard and the community voices are heard. And so Willette, now that you're here, we had just transitioned, we were about to transition to talking about challenges. But what I want to shoot to you real quick to talk about some of like the non-traditional ways that we can engage people civically.
Yeah, well, I think that some of the non-traditional ways, what I did when we went down to Georgia, we had the opportunity to go down to Georgia and, just engage people that had been formerly incarcerated or people that had never voted. And what we did was we went into their neighborhoods. We went right where they live and, we showed up with a clipboard and a piece of paper, and that didn't really sit well with people, especially in the hood. So, they was like, F that clipboard. And, because, they were like, people only come down here when they want our data. They don't never come back to do anything for us. So, just having a conversation with people and meeting them right where they are. I had an opportunity to converse with a young man named Nino, and he was a rapper. And so, he had a lot of insight about what went on in the hood and different things. And, what we actually did was really just talk about who I was and who he was. And, in that conversation, it opened him up to be able to realize that his vote was his voice. And initially, he wasn't going to come out. He wasn't going to engage. And after we conversed and had that conversation, he just, he softened because we talked about real stuff. We talked about how the police over-police their communities, how maybe a young guy would be out, maybe selling weed because that's the only way he could take care of his family, his little brothers and sisters. And so when we really had a conversation about life, and he came and rapped at 2 of our rallies, brought people with him, and it just shows that if you show people that you care, not just going out trying to get a signature or something, then they respond better. So that was one of the non-traditional ways that I engaged someone.
I know, Musa, you had talked about, have you done some voter registration work?
Yeah, we did some work slightly here. Definitely look forward to doing way more here, but we didn't held events to bring, like I say, bring awareness that individuals do have the right to vote, and just even bringing awareness that it was an election going on here in the city. A lot of people didn't know that there was a local election even taking place. You know what I'm saying? Let alone know the candidates. So yeah. But I definitely I look forward to bringing more change through the music aspect. I always thought about that as a thing to engage people. And so to know that worked in Atlanta, I think that's something we definitely can bring here in this city,
No, absolutely. And I know, go ahead, Willette.
Also, Marlon, social media was a great platform to be able to engage people, because even though people didn't know that there was an election coming up in Rockford, when we begin to engage people on social media and, create flyers to let them know that it was going to be a candidates forum, a way to engage people also is with a candidates forum, to let them know that, so that way you can be able to talk to the candidates that are on the ballot. Rockford had a primary election. We had 9 candidates that showed up at our forum, 1 incumbent. And, it was a really good forum. And it also showed us how disengaged or how a lot of elected officials' theory is different from people's reality. And so we engaged people through social media. We sent out flyers, we sent out reminders, to let them know that an election was coming up and that they should join this forum to find out who they would be voting for.
Yeah, I would also just piggyback. I know someone, I think Javier Musa was asking about my story. One of the ways that I've been able to sort of like involve people in civic engagement is I utilize my social media, like all of my social media handles to really show like the work that I do, but I also make sure that I include some piece of education that explains like how a bill becomes law. So, and it's almost to the point to where I've been doing it for so long. I've been home now for 9 years that my own family, from just reading my page, when they see me, they engage me in a different way because they see the type of work that we do. And so when I think about my story from the time that I've been home to even now, like a lot of it has been empowering, because as I've like grown in my journey through community organizing, in each phase of this work, you're able to learn. Because if you really lean on just the understanding that we've sort of gained from school, like to me, what I learned in school about civic engagement and the way things sort of play out in the real world is completely different. The first time I ever saw, we had a bill in committee that didn't pass, and then a couple of hours later, after talking to a couple of legislators, we were able to pass the same bill that didn't pass through. We were able to pass it through because of relationships that we had, and also just being able to see like the stronghold that Mike Manigan had on the legislator. Like if somebody was just to tell me that, like I would just probably say like, yeah, whatever. But when you actually see in action, you see like what that means and how he's able to influence, to stop policy, to pass policy. Like for me, that was a very empowering experience, and it also motivated me. It motivated me to want to come back to the community to say, hey, we need to get more involved. Like if we don't like the way that the way the police police our communities, then we need to get involved, because as a taxpayer, we're paying salaries for them to mistreat us. And then we're also saying, I don't want to have anything to say about it. Like, it's cool. You can just treat me wrong. You can treat me any type of way. I'll continue to pay your salary, but then won't even communicate and say, like, this is not right. It's almost like going to a restaurant and having bad service and still tip the person who served you as if like everything was great. And so just from my own journey and experience, I've been able to come back to the community and share my experience and what this process has been for me. And it's been very empowering to know that my voice matters, and not just on a picture or on a t-shirt. Like, I actually have seen my voice matter in real time because of the community organizing work that we've done. And I would also say that the more power we build and the more people we get involved in civic engagement, the way we negotiate changes, and the way we negotiate with people in power. So I do want to continue to just open it up if anybody has anything else that they want to share or any questions.
I'll jump in, Marlon. And then maybe we can take some questions. But, when I first came home, I came home in 2019. My first job was working with one of the longest sitting aldermen in Chicago. And, I worked downtown at City Hall, but I worked at the ward office for a minute before I went down to City Hall. And I had like a bird's eye view of the importance of the vote. I met my boss at the polls. I was going to vote, and, he asked me to come volunteer. I volunteered for 30 days and he hired me full time. And so, I began to, canvas, phone bank, do all of those things. And like I said, I had a bird's eye view of the importance of the vote. There were people that lived in the community, but if you didn't vote, you couldn't get a meeting. There were times when you could come up and maybe get a meeting, but it wasn't to the degree of people that voted. And when people voted, I understood that was their voice. And, that never left me. It has never left me to this point. And, even when we went down to Georgia, that was our messaging. Your vote is your voice. If you don't vote, then you can talk about something being wrong all day long. And then also letting people know that really they work for you, that people that are in office work for you. There is a 3% rule. 1%, you can get their attention. If you can get 1% of the people that vote for them to get on board with you, you get their attention. 2%, you can get a phone call. If you can get 3%, they'll have a meeting with you. 4 to 5%, you can probably persuade them to do what you want them to do, because votes equal the office. And if you get enough people behind you in that ward or that district, then guess what? You can get that phone call, you can get that meeting, and then you can begin to persuade them to do what you want them to do.
Amen. Anybody else? So one of the unique things about having a wife in this work is that you can get feedback even when you don't ask for it. So my wife told me this is moving more like a panel and not a training. So I want to make sure that I open this up to make sure that people, and she also texted me that I didn't say that there are 118 legislators, and the reason you need 60 votes is because that's a majority. So that's called feedback in the moment. But I do want to open it up because I do feel like we have sort of had like a panel conversation and not really a training. So I do want to open it up just to make sure that people are sort of following along.
I have a question. So a lot of the work that we do is obviously making sure that young people are civically engaged, people who are reentering are civically engaged. one thing that I've noticed when we were organizing inside and allowed inside Stateville, inside Cook County Jail, we noticed the COs are constantly telling people that they aren't valued, that they don't matter, reducing people down just to their last names or numbers. There's a lot of dehumanizing of people. Can you talk about how you felt in that moment versus how you feel now, and being on the outside where you're sitting in a room where you have our undivided attention, we value you in every possible way, and how that's changed the way that you're moving within your organizing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would have to say, like, I appreciate and I'm thankful for the family support and prayers from my family while I was incarcerated, because I've never felt, even though the COs would say some of, like, sort of like all of this nasty stuff, like I've never allowed that to sort of like influence like who I thought I was. And so even coming out, like I knew that I was being called to do something great, because the entire time that I was in prison, I was preparing myself with the little scarce resources that were available, which was a lot of relationships. And so just from building relationships inside, like people, the mentors that I had in prison really like had me to the point to where I believed I could have ran through a brick wall if that's what I wanted to do. And it was because of the mentorship of the people in prison. So coming out, like I sort of came out expecting to learn and to grow and to build with people who wanted to do this work. Now, I didn't know that it would happen in the ways that it happened, but I knew that was something that I wanted to do. And even going in, I was tired of being in the streets and being influenced by all of these different characters or characters that people were sort of telling me that I had to play. Like I was tired of being a drug dealer. I was tired of so-called being a player. And so when I went to prison, I was broken to the point to where I was like, I want to be Marlon, and I want to be comfortable with being Marlon. And so regardless of whatever the CO said about me, I was just in a different space. And when I'm out in the streets, that's the energy that I bring. I bring that I really mean what I say, that if I say I love you, I mean it. And so when we was out in Georgia, like you can't be out or be in Cook County Jail and not know who you are, or not like be in a place to where you love people. You just can't, like, or you won't make it, because people will sniff you out. Oh, they just trying to get some money. They trying to learn or get some data. But I think when people see that you're genuine and that you really mean what you say, like even if they're in prison around COs, like they'll begin to say, like, you know what, I do matter. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says about me. And I know me, Willette, and some other folks during this last election, we created sort of like a voting guide where we didn't try to influence people on who to vote for. But what we did was we gave them sort of like a checklist of all of the candidates and what they stood for based on what they said, to really inform the people in Cook County Jail. But I would say that I definitely feel empowered, and not because of I just feel like I'm just this powerful guy. I feel like I'm a powerful person because I'm connected to the community. And that's something that I would never lose sight of, is that like I want to be that person that stays connected to the community, because to me that's the voices that I want to amplify in this work, and also allow them to influence their voices to change policy, so that our communities look different, because we have people in leadership positions that are from the community, that value community, that share similar values that we do.
I'll hop in. You know, what is it, Jen? Hi, Jen. When I was inside, you know, my story is a little different from Marlon's. You know, I'm a woman of faith, you know, and so my worth and my value came from knowing who I was in God. And when I began to understand that, no guard, no staff, or anybody could diminish who I really knew that I was. And when I understood what God meant when he said, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, you know, and that there was greatness on the inside of every individual he created, and that we all had unique gifts and talents and skills, and that wherever we were, purpose could be found anywhere, even behind walls. And so I just really began to move towards that while I was on the inside. And I just never really believed that I would spend all of that time in prison. So I was always preparing to come home. And when I came home, there were people in my life, like, you know, I have an amazing support group and amazing people that really, really invested in leadership development with me. And so that makes me want to invest in other people and their leadership development, because centering people with lived experience in any work or any arena is key. Because if you don't, then they, you know, you're saying that although they know they're valuable, the space and the doors have to be open, you know, so that people will, you know, people can embrace. But I think also a lot of times we talk about having a seat at the table. Well, you know, some tables you will never be able to have a seat at because you've been formerly impacted or a system survivor. So therefore you go and you create your own table, and then you invite them to the table, because we are the experts of our own experience. You know, nobody knows our stories better than us, you know, and we are people that have such input, insight. Some people that sit in offices will never go into the neighborhood and engage somebody to get out to vote. You know, that's the power of what happened in Georgia. It was boots on the ground. People that have been formerly impacted, that was a completely overlooked demographic. And people knew the value of people that had been formerly impacted. And so we went out and we began to engage those people and let them know that your voice is so powerful that you can flip a Senate, you know? And so that happened. And so now we know the power of somebody directly impacted. And that doesn't even put the value on it. We know that they're valuable even if they never flip the Senate. But that just goes to show in real time how powerful we are.
Yeah, I would also add too to Jen's question about just the officers and how they act and respond to people. I think part of the challenge that I think this group we can begin to have a discussion around is, I think that creates the one of the challenges that we face trying to engage people civically, is that because when people have a negative experience with government or the system in general, then they just don't want anything else to do with it. And so I think when people come home from prison after hearing a guard say that you're nothing and you'll never be nothing, a lot of times people bring that home and then they have a mistrust for the system and just don't want to be involved at all. And so I do want to open it up. My wife is something else. Look,
she probably gave you some good input. What she say?
She's pulling out data and
pull everything. It out.
It says the racial discrepancy in the findings was striking. White people sent to jail voted a little less often, but Black people turned dramatically away from voting. Jail time reduced their voting participation rates from 26% to 13%. Wow. And so I do want to open it up to talk about like what are some of the challenges that we should anticipate when we think about like trying to engage people civically.
I don't want to keep speaking, being one person that speak. Do anybody else got any ideas?
We can start picking people.
Yeah.
I can go. So like, I know someone had dropped it in the chat, just like the way our like government and like our legislative process goes is like really inaccessible to people. And that's in part because of our like really crappy civic education system. But my question for you was if you could just like briefly explain how a bill moves through the legislature and like the different touch points where people can advocate and like how to be creative in those moments so that you are like engaging a wide range of people instead of just those who are already tuned into the work.
Absolutely. So I would say one of the touch points is definitely at the beginning. As a bill is being drafted, to me, it's important for our voices to be heard in the beginning as we think about like how legislation is drafted. And I've been a part of a process where we did listening sessions all summer, and we did a lot of surveys and one-on-ones and focus groups and house meetings. And basically, we were able to take this information and really a lawyer drafted the legislation based on the feedback that they received from us. So one of the first touch points I would definitely say is in the beginning. Another touch point, because after a bill is drafted, it then goes to the Rules Committee, where it's assigned a certain committee. And so I think another point, a touch point, could be based on which committee that bill is sent to. If any like elected officials that represent our communities are a part of those committees, that is another touch point where we can influence the movement of that bill. After a bill is moved out of committee, is then moved on to the House floor, where we can then begin to me, that would be another touch point, because then that's when we can go out to Springfield or meet with our elected officials in district to talk about the importance of this bill, or if there's some amendments that we feel that are needed. We could meet with our elected officials to try to influence the language of the bill at that point. And then once the bill is passed out of the House into the Senate, we could also meet with our state senators if we feel like something was missing or needs to be added. We could then try to influence them to change the language at that point. And then once a bill is passed out of the Senate, it goes then to the governor's office, where it will be signed, and then it becomes public. Did I miss any touch points, Alex, or any other? And I would say even just not with just the legislative process, I think it's important to know the process for the city council. We used to ask the question in our community organizing training, who's more powerful, the city council or the mayor?
The mayor.
But on paper, who's the most powerful? On paper, the city council should be more powerful than the mayor, but in all actuality, the mayor is more powerful than the city council. Any other questions, or anybody else with challenges?
I have a question on something you were just speaking on, Marlon, a little bit at the end, and I think Willette spoke to this a little bit too, sort of getting people fired up about people power and overcoming this sense of maybe cynicism in the process. I mean, we live in an incredibly corrupt political city and state, and I'm wondering about how it is that you all do your organizing in a, both in a way that instills hope in others, but also in yourself. I mean, I think people have rightfully a lot of skepticism about how much elected officials remain accountable to us and to the communities they're supposed to serve once they're in office. And so I guess I'm wondering too, like how you balance being realistic and being pragmatic, but not letting that kind of cynicism get the better of us.
Great question. And I would just say, I think about a saying that we say in organizing that says, live in the world as it is, but build relationships that hopefully can create the world that we want to create. And so for me, I would also just think about just like where I come from and the lifestyle that I lived before I started doing this work. And every day I wake up grateful. I wake up thankful. I wake up hopeful. Because I never imagined that I would be doing this type of work. And so.
Can you please? Oh, whoops.
This is crazy.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I can't take it. I can't take it. But anyway, I would say for me, I think so. There are other things like I value my family, as you can see. I have other hobbies and things that I love to do. So all of my time is not consumed in this work, and so that's how I'm able to create that balance. But then also, like I just believe in like I value relationships, and I believe that when I think about just the challenges and barriers that I've seen in this work, is I've been out where I was trying to do voter registration and started talking to somebody, and the person maybe shared that they need a job or they need another resource. So for me, it's about also being aware of like, I can't just push my agenda like, no, I don't care about that. You don't have a job, just sign this paper and register to vote. So I would take time out to try to connect that person to a resource. I would follow up, make sure that that person was connected. So like for me, it's about relationships. Like, and that's where it starts and ends with me. The work is second, but if I'm not in right relationship with you, then there is no work. And for me, the hope is just seeing the Javiers and the Willettes and all of these people who have been recently released. Like I've been home 9 years. These are people who have been home maybe a year or two. And so for me, there's always somebody that can give you a hope shot that keeps you going in this work and pushes you to where you can operate from a place for when you're operating in reality, but you're also moving and building relationships towards the world you want to create. And one thing I do want to touch on, and I would feel bad if I didn't talk about this before we get off this call, is I think civic engagement, and somebody named this, it is also about accountability. Because a lot of times our elected officials come and they have these great speeches and they tell us all of these great things that they're going to do. And then when they get in office, we don't hear from them. And so it's also important to have a base of people that can begin to call that elected official's office and say, hey, what's going on? I would give an example in Springfield. If you've ever been in Springfield, and if you haven't been in Springfield, there are basically like 3 places where you could probably run into a legislator. I would say just walking around the Capitol, you may see a legislator and may have to walk up to them and give them a spiel. You may jump on the elevator with an elected official. And then there's the rail, which is the state reps and senators are actually on the floor of the legislator, and you can send in a card at the rail and that elected official will come out. So what I learned early on in my organizing career is that I would be at the rail and I would have my 2 or 3 people and we would send a card in and the elected official wouldn't come out. And the more and more we begin to organize, there was a time when the legislators, when they would see the orange t-shirts of CRS in the lobby, they would see that car and they would come out because they respected the power that we built. And so when I think about civic engagement, I definitely think about accountability. And that's also something that I share with community members. Like if there's somebody in my community that's complaining about everything, then my follow-up response to them is, what do you want to do? How can we begin to build in a way to where we can hold our elected officials accountable? And then if they don't get in line, how can we begin to develop leaders to run for these positions so that these offices really represent and reflect the values of the community? And ultimately, that's what it's about. Like I would love for Willette to be a state rep and know that we have somebody in Springfield that's representing us. I would even say Sonia Harper, who is a good friend of mine, who I met doing community organizing work. Like when I heard that she was elected, as a state rep, like to me, that gives me hope. So there is always something that you can use to give you hope. The omnibus bill that just passed in Illinois, that's something that we can have hope around. So I think even in those times when I'm down and out and feel frustrated, there's always someone or something that I can look at and see and say, you know what? I heard Javier say that he's doing some voter registration work in Aurora to get the mayor reelected because the mayor really values reentry work. For me, that's a hope shot. And that encourages me, because it's like, okay, Javier, what do you need me to do? Sometimes I overcommit myself and want to do everything, but I think that's always something that we can be hopeful about, even in those down days.
I have a question. So I've been phone banking with this organization for treatment, not trauma. So removing police officers from nonviolent mental health situations. And sometimes like I run into people that are like, well, it shouldn't be my job to like contact my alderman. The mayor should just take care of it. Or like, a lot of people are usually like dealing with issues themselves and like take the time to like talk to them about it. But that connection isn't made of like, if you like use your own voice and tell the person that's in charge of your area, like this needs to be done for everyone to have a better quality of life. Like how do you make that connection sometimes when the ideas don't meet in the middle?
I'll try to chime in on that. You know, Aaron, a lot of times my my approach to someone that may say something like that is, would you have a business and an employee that wouldn't put in any quality work for you? You know, eventually you'd get rid of that employee because they're not doing the job. And your alderman works for you. And if there is if it's holes in the street big enough to throw a whole human being down in, the person that you are going to have to engage to get that taken care of will be your alderman. If your streets are pitch black when you walk through them at night and there are no street lights, the person you're going to have to engage is your alderman. You can talk about it till you're blue in the face, but if it's not going to change, just like with the many dilapidated buildings that are in Chicago, you know, Action Now began to organize to be able to get them to allow residents to buy those buildings and not tear them down, because you know, it brings your property value down. But you can sit up and talk about abandoned buildings all day long, but what are you going to do about it? Because your alderman is the one that works for you. And he is the one, he or she is the one that you have to go through levels of government to take care of certain things, or you have to go to whatever your target is to take care of certain things. You know, and in our communities, you know, you have to, we really got to get people to understand that the local election is one of the most important elections that you'll ever vote in. It's not the president. You know, it is that's an important election, but your local election, whenever someone gets to Springfield, whenever someone gets to Washington, D.C., that is where they work for you. But, you know, just really, I learned that when I worked for the alderman, that every dime that comes through that ward, he get a say-so in it. Every corporation that wanted to build sat down and had a conversation with him first. Every single one of them. Nothing got done in that ward without first coming through the alderman. And you know, they say in Chicago that, you know, what they say about the aldermen, that they the wardermans. But you know, but I just see that, you know, that is just how it is in our cities. You're gonna have to deal with the aldermen. And if they're not doing what you want them to do, 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%, you know. So
yeah, I would just add on to that, Willette. I think those are opportunities. When I think about civic engagement, I think you just gave us a perfect example of like how you can engage people. And if somebody was to say, well, the mayor should just take care of it, I probably would ask them, would you ask LeBron James to fix your toilet? Like LeBron James is in the NBA, you would go to a plumber. So you asking or assuming that the mayor should fix something that the alderman is in control of, like it's not gonna happen. So those are opportunities for me to say, hey, let's go call the alderman right now and schedule a meeting and let's go talk to him. And be willing to do that with them to where they see like, whoa, Marlon, you know the alderman? It's like, no, I don't know him, but we all can pick up the phone, we all can call them, we all can make complaints to their office, and then we all can begin to build in our communities to where you may show up the first time with just me and the other person, but then what I've seen happen is people get pissed off and then they want to go back. It's like when the light come on, it's like people like, you know what, I'm coming back with 20 people. And then when you come back with 20 people, you see how now the alderman is offering you water and would you like some fruit or some snacks and have a seat, because now you've been able to get the alderman's attention. And I think for me, one of the things that I learned from even people going to Springfield with me was my job was to get them on the train. And I used to think like, oh yeah, when they come to Springfield, I'm going to teach them this and I'm going to teach them that. And what happens is when you get on that train and have that experience, for a lot of people just start to like they start to connect their own dots. And then it's like, Marlon, when are you coming back? Because I'm getting ready to go home and tell everybody that, like, listen, we need to vote, we need to do this, and I'm going to do this. And so for me, my job was to get them up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes this meant I would go and pick people up at 3:30 and we'll pull up to the train and we would be running to get on the train. But what would happen is that in that experience, people would start to connect their own dots. And then I would just be there to sort of debrief, like follow-up steps. What did you learn about how power really moves? And what do you need to do when you go back to your community to come back and show up more powerful, to where now these elected officials see that they have to pay attention to you. So when I think about civic engagement, I think if a person stops and allows me to talk to them, I got them. Because you're not going to walk away without saying like, okay, I'm willing to show up at a meeting or something. If they keep walking, I don't want to hear that, then oh well. But when a person stops and gives you that time, then that is the opportunity where you have to begin to say like, and then even if they try to say all this stuff don't matters, I've even shared like I was one of those people who thought stuff didn't matter until I saw the biggest ceiling expansion bill signed in 2017 that we worked on. And so for me, that's when I would share a personal story on, no, this works. I've seen it work. And it's not perfect, but I think the more and more people that get involved, the more and more we can begin to change the system to where it reflects the value and the voices of the community.
Thank you. That was very helpful. I'll make sure to mention those things when I phone bank again.
Anybody else? I know it's Friday.
Marlon, I had to hop off for a second to have a one-on-one. Little did I know that one-on-one was with your wife.
Yep. Yep. She's all over the place.
That's why she hopped into the meeting a second ago. She was trying to do a cross-world situation.
Yeah, this is what we do 24/7. We trying to build power, collaborate, and change the world. She said in that order. And she's my boss, even though I don't work for Live Free.
You do, you just don't know it.
I know. No, I don't mind. We love what we do. Anybody else? I think we have 8 minutes left, and I know this has been a somewhat of an unorthodox training, but Alex, I definitely extend my hand to support and help, whether it's mentoring, coaching, just consider me as a extra staff person.